Good morning everybody and welcome back to another film. So today I've come to an entirely new location for me. I'm right on the border between Lancashire and Cumbria, and I've come to explore a woodland following a tip off from a good friend. So thank you David for the tip off, but what I have failed to do is actually ask him, did he actually get into the woodland and have a look for himself. He sent me a couple of Google pins and I've just followed them this morning, so here I am. As I've walked in already, I've seen one or two nice backlit subjects, but I've avoided those because I wanted to get into the thick of it and see and do a bit of exploring and see what I can find in the wood itself. As you know, I always enjoy photographing backlit grasses, and there was just bags of them up there, but I had to resist. It might have been a mistake, I don't know. The sun at the moment is lovely and low, which is why the backlighting was really showing nicely on those grasses. The weather forecast today was for cloud, which is entirely the reason why I've come here. At the moment there's a bit of cloud, but for the most part it's clear blue skies. Fingers crossed that will change, because as we all know, photographing in harsh sunlight in a woodland, especially this time of year, the beginning of September, there's a lot of contrast and it's quite difficult to deal with. Anything's on the table for me today, so whether that's the bigger scene or the smaller scenes, I'm not going to be too particular because of the conditions. Ideally, as we all know, we all want a bit of atmosphere in woods, and I haven't got that certainly at the moment, so I'm going to have a wander through now and just see what I can pick up along the way. Right, so I'm 45 minutes into my walk and I've now got to the head of the woodland, and I just wanted to report on what's happened so far. So I've been in touch with my good friend to see whereabouts in the woodland he actually went to, and how much of it he actually explored. Now I do know now that he parked at the top. He gave me two pins, one at the top, one at the bottom. He parked at the top and walked into the bit where I am now, which I have to say, I'll show you in a second, is really beautiful, and I can see why he was jumping for joy when he found it. I, on the other hand, started at the bottom and worked up. I have this thing whereas I like to get the hard work done at the beginning of the day, and then I've got a nice walk downhill back to the van when I'm feeling more tired. Our woodlands typically in Lancashire, where I am now, are all located for the most part in these steep river valleys, really difficult to get to. Now this whole area is private estate, and there is a bridleway that brings you up through the woodland, which is what I've just walked up through. For the most part it's all cleared on either side of the path, and you can't access the woodland without special permission. So I'm not going to go wandering in where I don't have permission. But this little patch here is really, really beautiful, and I can, like I say, I can see why he was excited about it. The conditions, sadly for me today, aren't really great for this type of photography. Let me just turn this round properly, then you can see I've got my camera up. And these lovely mature oak trees just hanging on this valley here, absolutely beautiful, and you can imagine what that would look like in the right conditions. As I say, I've not got those conditions today, but as I'm here, pheasants everywhere. There's nearly as many estate workers as there are pheasants on this place. It's just crawling with both. But anyway, back to the photograph. I've taken a shot just so I can show you this composition, because it would seem a shame not to at least show you this while I'm here, and the composition that I would ordinarily set up. I've taken the image and I am going to put it up, but please don't judge me on the quality of the light. It's more about the composition, which I think is really, really beautiful, and like I say, in the right conditions this would be a stunning shot. So I'll talk you through that now. So I'll walk you through the scene, and I'll put the crop box on as I'm talking you through from left to right, and then I'll tell you about the settings of the camera in just a second. I'm getting bitten whilst I'm standing here. The midges are pretty bad today at this part of the wood. So this big old oak tree on the left hand side I've excluded from the shot because it's straight, it's not got a lot of character, it's got a lot of shadow behind it, and it's not going to be that complementary to the rest of the trees, which have got lovely shapes and character about them. You've got to remember that I'm using a 16:9 aspect ratio camera, and what you're seeing there won't necessarily include the left and right that I will take on the final frame. The left-hand anchor point will be just to the left of the 3 oak trees that are at the farthest point of the image there. They form a lovely left-hand side to the frame, and I'll put the crop box on now just so you can see where that is. The centre point is going to be these 2 oaks here, of course. Lovely twisty branches as they go up, and then you've got this lovely arcing feel to the branches as they move over to the right. In terms of the canopy, I'm not going to show the whole canopy because we've got a hillside at the back with the skyline showing through. On a foggy atmospheric day that wouldn't be a problem, but it really is a problem today, and I'm making the best of a difficult situation. So I'll crop quite a bit off that. I'll put the crop box on at the top now so you can see where that's going to be. The right hand side of the frame, you've got a holly down here. I'm not going to include that in its entirety. Holly leaves, certainly today, catching the light, and they've got this waxy surface to the leaves, and they create little hot spots that I'm not too keen on. But the 2 trees down here on the right hand side, they're arcing over the steep river valley, they're almost falling into it, are going to form my right hand side of the frame. I'll put that crop box on now. In terms of mid-ground, foreground, you've got all this lovely bracken here, and in another few weeks this will be lovely and golden, and the conditions for this shot are just going to get better and better. But I like it as it is now. We've got some backlighting coming through it. Hopefully I can deal with that in post. And then in the middle ground here, you've got this twisty fallen tree. It just creates a little bit more interest. And as it happens, this point here is probably going to be my focusing point. So in terms of lens, I've got a 24 to 85mm lens on, and it's currently set on the 45mm end. Apertures, I'm on f11, and I'm bracketing the exposure quite significantly. Crawling with pheasants, this place. I'm bracketing the exposure quite significantly to try and pull as much as I can out of the frame, like I said, because the conditions are really difficult. And I've exposed either side, plus and minus, up to 2 stops, taking about 5 images, and I'll just use those images to get the best that I can from the frame. ISO 100. I'll move out of the way so you can see the final crop, and then I'll put that image on now. So I'm sure you will have already noticed the potential shot behind me over my left hand shoulder. I'm not going to photograph that today, but I can absolutely see 100% why certainly some of you will have spotted it. Vertical trunks, really strong shapes, the light bleeding through from behind, backlit vegetation. It's got a lot of the elements that you'd want from a scene, but for the same reason as the last, I'm not going to photograph it because the light is just too harsh. It would be much better if it was earlier on in the day when the light was nice and warm, or we had some of that lovely atmosphere that we've not got today. But 100% I could see why some of you will have been saying straight away as soon as you saw this clip that there's a shot there. Yes, in the right conditions, absolutely. So I've come here in this little shady spot because the wind's got up, the light is harsh, as I've said. But here on the floor, hundreds, probably thousands of wood sorrel leaves. Now, wood sorrel is a plant that grows, it's a native plant to the UK, and it grows in our woodlands. And in springtime you get these lovely little delicate white flowers with pink veins running through them. Now, of course, we've not got any of that now, but because the wind is strong, I just figured that it's probably to my advantage to concentrate on things that are either completely static or things that are on the floor. And I've had a quick scan over, and I think there might be something in there. I've not found anything particular. I'm going to spend a bit of time looking, and hopefully I can come up with something. There is a bit of, I can't even remember whether it's a fern or a bracken. I didn't even look at it that closely, but I saw a frond on the floor, and I saw some of the leaves peeping through, and I thought potentially that could do it for this next shot. Now, as has been the case for the last couple of months, certainly, maybe more, I've been putting a triptych on at the end of the video, and I'm going to try and do that today. So I need 2 more images. I think this is going to be my second. The landscape I will put on as my first in the centre, with 2 images either side. So I'm going to have a look over there now, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I can find my second image. So it's proving difficult. I didn't, I think I said before, work this out before I started recording the last piece, when I talked about the potential in this little area here. You can see it doesn't cover a big area. You can see all the sorrel leaves. There's literally thousands of them. And I initially saw a fern, and I'll show you that now. Here. And what I saw in the corner of my eye was the little sorrel leaves growing through the fronds, and at a distance I thought, yep, I can probably make a composition of that. But as I've got into it and I've looked and I moved the camera around, I can't seem to find anything that's really hangs together nicely, that's not cluttered. So I started looking at other options, and there's 1 or 2 leaves dotted about. There's one here that I quite liked, this one. I framed this up, and whilst the leaf has got nice shape, I don't know if I was to give it my scoring rating of 1 to 5, it would be less than a 3. And I often feel for the videos for the channel, let that just get the light right, I feel that I want to get at least a 3 and above. That's the quality I try to achieve. Looking further afield, there was another leaf here which I'll show you, which is buried deeper within the sorrel, and this was probably my closest to actually getting the camera out, and it's this one here. And I quite like that. If you look at the composition, it's nice and clean all around it. The leaf's got nice detail. There's a lot to like about that shot, and I like the way these 2 little horns stick out. And like I said, all the sorrel leaves are really pristine. This one here, which is just, you see it there, one of the purslanes, that leaf is in the way of this shot, and I can't really position the camera to a complementary place without that being in there. But I think when I look at it closely, and I ask myself the question, would it be something I would hang on my wall? And the answer is probably not. And that's a good benchmark for your photography, is would you put it on your wall? And if the answer is no, then it's probably not going to be worthwhile taking it. And like I say, I think all these images that I've found are from a score of 1 to 5 are a 3 at best, and maybe that's been a bit generous. So I'm going to put the bag on and go and have a look further afield and see if I can find something else. So the triptych is beginning to elude me, but we'll see how we get on. So I've spent a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time, stirring at this little patch of river where you would think above me, but there isn't. Certainly down in the stream in front of me are lots of fallen ash leaves from the ash tree, of course, and within them there is a single sycamore, little tiny sycamore leaf with autumn colours, And there's things I like about it, but there's also things I'm not so sure of that niggle me. And ordinarily if I've spent this long thinking about an image, and I've said it in videos before, if I've got to think about an image for too long, then it's probably not going to work. But I've framed it up with the video camera a couple of times and taken a few stills, and the stalks of the ash leaves really bother me. They're quite stark, but there's also something about the repeating pattern that I like. So I'm going to get my camera out on this occasion and give it a shot. This video is panning out to be more about why we don't take images as opposed to why we do take images, it seems. But whilst I'm trying to find images that make me happy, that I find compelling to look at myself, I think it is important to show the ones that fall short. I'm on the fence at the moment as to whether this one will really work or not. I'll take it, I'll put it on, and I'll let you decide. Right, so it's very rare that I'm so on the fence about a shot. And even now, when I've lined it up and I've taken a couple, I'm still unsure. And that worries me a little bit, and that's a good message to take away from today, that if you've got that little bit of doubt, then you've really got to question whether you need to be taking the image or not. This could go either way for me, and maybe the processing will make something of it. There's definitely something I like about it. It's almost got like a Japanese art feel about it, and I think that's what keeps bringing me back to liking it. The things I don't like, and I've said, the white stalks of the ash stems, the ash leaf stems, are really quite jarring to the eye. They're very straight, very stark, and the patterns that they form are not overly cohesive. They're a little bit cluttered. I would have liked them to be a bit more ordered, and that's asking a lot, I know. And also, a lot of the leaflets that are attached to the stem, a lot of them are ripped, torn, or holes in them, and I am looking for perfection a lot of the time, most of the time, if not all of the time, and that's what this image hasn't got. I've got the macro lens on. I'm currently on f8. There's a bit of movement in the water, so the leaves are shifting ever so slightly during the exposure. So in order to combat that, I have put the ISO up to 1600, and that's probably as high as I ever go with this camera. I'll probably get away with it, but I need to do it in order to freeze the movement, the very, very slight movement that the leaves have got, and that's still only giving me a shutter speed of a 60th of a second. That's possibly because I've put a polarizer on the front to cut down any reflections, and that's losing a stop of light straight away. So that's why I've had to go to such a high ISO. It's never really still at any one time. Even when the wind isn't blowing, it's still moving and quivering. So I will put that shot on now, and let me know what you think. It always surprises me how a video pans out over the course of a day. More often than not, I don't plan my videos. I just go out and I rely on whatever my eye picks up as I'm walking through an area. And often a theme will develop around that for the video. Today, it would appear that the theme seems to be about listening to my inner voice. The shot of the trees this morning that I took, my inner voice was telling me that absolutely 100% the light wasn't right. The composition was lovely, the scene was lovely, but the light just spoiled it. It needs that atmosphere. I listen to my inner voice normally and I would leave that alone, but because I felt that showing you the composition added value, I went through the process anyway. And I'm not saying that the image won't look okay. I'm sure it will when I've processed it, but it won't look anywhere near as good as it would in the right conditions. The second shot, the ash leaves, my inner voice was bouncing from one side to the other, and I generally have a rule of thumb that says if I've got to think about something for too long, it's generally, I generally need to move on and leave it alone. I score my images from 1 to 5. Anything below a 3, generally I don't even take, let alone score. But I'm aiming for 3s as a minimum, 4s ideally, 5s they come along so rare that it's hardly worth thinking you're going to get those on a day out. That's the way that I look at my photography. Now with the ash leaves, I thought I'd take the shot anyway, just to see how off kilter my inner voice might have been on that occasion, because I do think that it was a real tussle in my mind as to which way it was going to go. I still think those stalks are a problem, but who knows, post-processing I might be able to tone them down and get something that's half reasonable and hit that 3 mark. Now as I walked down this path to my right hand side here, I saw a potential scene, and my inner voice straight away said absolutely 100% there's something here, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'll show you what I've found, and hopefully you'll agree. So I've got my tripod and camera all set up there by the side of the bridleway, but I'll just talk you through what's happening here in the woodland. So all around here you can see there, huge amount there, and another great swathe there of fallen, felled timber, and that's for the most part rhododendron. Rhododendron you can see here. Now this is hugely detrimental to our native flora, and it cuts out all the light on the forest floor in the springtime when our native plants, our ground flora needs to flower. So the people that manage the estate have cut it all down, and hopefully in time the seed bank will restore, and further up the hillside there's bluebells, so I'm sure there's bulbs under here just waiting for that light next spring to burst into flower again. So a good bit of work by the team that manage this estate. But for me, I benefited from the deadfall on the ground all around here. Look at those lovely golden tones, absolutely beautiful. And above, as luck would have it, is a rowan tree, and the rowan tree naturally has berries. You'll have seen them just then on the floor, and I just needed to find a composition, and my inner voice told me that there was definitely something here. Those golden tones and those red berries, there had to be a composition. I looked at this one here, but I wasn't over keen on the interruption of the dead fern fronds there, and this one here is quite nice as well, nice little cluster there, but I wasn't keen on the moss. I just didn't think the green really worked as a composition with all the brown tones. The two that I went for, main ones, are that one there and this one here. That one I quite liked, it was a nicer cluster of berries, but this one was in a better position. This one here, as you can see, you've got this leaf here which is actually a rowan leaf, and I felt that really worked well with these berries. If there's one thing I'm not keen on, it's this leaf here, and I'm not going to move it because it's how it is. I just feel it's a little bit too different to the other clusters of leaves around it. But that's the difference between images that make the 3.5, 4s and the images that make 5s. That perfection is what we're ultimately looking for, but I think this is a really lovely image. So the camera's already set up, so I'll just talk you through the composition now. So this is the image on a 100mm macro lens. I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see better. Now this is a focus stack, and it's a focus stack of 5 at f16. The reason I've focus stacked it is because the leading edge of this leaf blade here is significantly higher than the stalk at the bottom. We're talking about 1.5 inches of vertical height difference, and that's quite significant. f16 as a single frame could possibly give a good result, I'm sure, but the stack will make sure it's absolutely crisp all the way through. I'm on 100 ISO and the shutter speed is 2.5 seconds. I've put a polarizer on, but it's actually made very little difference indeed. It's really not helped, but I've left it on anyway. It's sort of warmed the whole scene up ever so slightly, but in terms of reducing reflections, it hasn't done anything. Some of you may still find this a little bit jarring, this leaf here. I've grown to accept it, but sometimes, often, these things are the difference between what makes an image a 3, a 4 or a 5 star. I don't mind it too much, but it definitely isn't lifting it to the 5 star quality that I would ultimately be looking for. So I shall put that image on now. Well, that's it once again from me for today, folks. Images to come in just a second. I've decided this week to put the images on individually rather than as a group of 3. I just felt that those first 2 were more illustrative than anything else. As always, if you're not already a subscriber, don't forget to subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've seen today, and ring the bell for those all important notifications. Leave some comments below, let me know what you think of today's images, and more importantly, whether you listen to your inner voice when you're out taking photographs. So until next time, thank you all so much for joining me. Bye for now.